Good morning, friends. Welcome to CEC live lecture series, and this series is about Indian writing in English translation, and it's a huge subject. We started discussing texts and trends in Indian writing, Indian literature, from the very early period up to the end. We continued up to the modern period, and already we have done a large number of lectures. In fact, today is the penultimate lecture. The next one will be the last one, in which all three of us who have conducted the series will be summing up some of the points regarding this series. And as you know that these days the main issue in Indian writing has emerged as, if not the main, at least one of the main issues that has emerged in Indian writing in English translation is the issue of activism through theatre. People who are part of the theatre, people who write, people who enact, people who organize, people who direct and present plays, all of them are leaving an impact on the audience, for which reason it can be called theatre activism. And this lecture is devoted to a discussion on the theatre activist Mahashweta Devi, a known name in Indian writing today. And for this lecture, we have as a resource person Dr. Payal Nagpal. Dr. Payal Nagpal teaches English literature in Janaki Devi Memorial College, Delhi University, and she is a theatre person. She has done research on theatre, modern theatre. She has published books and articles on theatre and conducted workshops. And she is the most apt person so far as this particular subject is concerned. So we requested her to give a talk particularly on this topic. Welcome, Dr. Payal Nagpal, and please give your lecture.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Prakash. Today's lecture, as Professor Prakash has just mentioned, is going to be on theatre and activism, and we'll be looking at some plays by Mahashweta Devi. Mahashweta Devi, who's well known for a play like Hazar Chaurasi Ki Maan, Mother of 1084. In today's lecture, I will be focusing on plays written by Mahashweta Devi and are not as popularly known to people outside the world of Bengali literature. So she is written in these plays in Bangla, and they've been translated by Shanak Bandyopadhyay. And 2 or 3 of these plays, plays like Bayan, Ajir, a play like Urvashi and Johnny, or for that matter, a very, very important play, Water. These actually show us how, as a playwright, Mahashweta Devi focused, her concerns were on people who were totally on the margins. These were the really, really marginalized groups. They were the indigenous groups, they were tribals, they were people who were, in a sense, never part of the mainstream day-to-day life. So as a playwright, as a writer, she has devoted her entire life to focus on these people who are always left there on the margins and are never looked at as entities who have rights of their own and are to be part of the society. So, and she understands their context in terms of not parameters that are developed, in terms of, let's say, the context of the city, but she discusses them and presents them in terms of parameters that belong to them, that are created and that emerge out of their specific context. So it is not as if a context is imposed on these people, but it is a context that gradually emerges. So as a first, we will be looking at a play called Bayan. And Bayan, in a way, is of course a play on also the word, the Hindi word for it, the Hindi word for the word witch. And however, the Bayan is different from the witch. She is, as specified in the play, is not the witch, because she cannot be killed by the society. She is somebody who's going to remain on the margins of the society, and the people are going to provide some kind of food and water to this woman. So the play begins with this interaction between the Bayan and her husband, who of course is no longer with her. So it's a play that focuses on the Dome community, and there is the Bayan's real name is actually Chandidasi Gangadasi, and she's a daughter of Kalu Dome. Now there is something very interesting about Mahashweta Devi's plays, and that is that she makes it a point to use a myth, a kind of mythology by which the community understands itself. And these are myths that, I mean, a person might or might not believe in, but these are myths that, in a sense, regulate that particular, the belief system and the existence of that community. So vis-a-vis the Bayans, and vis-a-vis the Dome community, the myth is that, when Harishchandra lost his kingdom, it was Kalu Dome who gave him shelter, and when finally the kingdom was restored to Harishchandra, Kalu Dome did not get anything. So he said that, how is it that when I had given you shelter, how is it that I do not get anything from you? So to this, there is a voice that comes and says that all the cremation grounds of the world are yours. So the Dome community looks after the cremation grounds and so on. So prior to, of course, laws on burning and so on, the children were buried, and that is a context to this play. And the fact that there is a woman who has been branded as a Bayan, and she has been thrown outside of mainstream society. So that is the protagonist of Mahashweta Devi's plays, and that is why one of the important things that we need to ask here is what is, really speaking, the job of the writer. So we've already been through a vast array of playwrights who have in their own way focused on concerns and themes that they think are relevant. And with Mahashweta Devi, we are looking at her focus on communities and zones that have been totally placed outside the purview of what we understand the world to be. So we see this Bayan as somebody who is not getting anything. The society is supposed to provide for her. They are supposed to give her. They are supposed to leave food, oil, water at her doorstep. And she finally mentions that they leave very little, barely enough for her. So. And then the play, in a sense, takes us back to this whole process of the making of the Bayan. How is it this woman who was extremely beautiful and was part of the institution of marriage, and she has a child. So how is it that this woman became the Bayan? And as her husband, of course, recalls that he always admired her. Her beauty, and he kept her well and would provide for her and take care of her. And he too was also from the same community, and how he was also a government servant because he was working in the morgue. So a change there, whereas the husband's working in the morgue. Here is the Bayan here is this woman who's of course been branded as a Bayan, but when she is prior to that, she is somebody who is supposed to bury the children, and she's supposed to take care of the graves. So she's uncomfortable performing this task, and time has moved on, and she wants to, in a sense, put a stop to this and rework this whole idea of ancestry, in a sense, whatever she has inherited. And in a situation where she's uncomfortable performing her duties, she's caught in a situation where another family accuses her of having wished that the child should die. And having given birth to a boy herself, she is somebody who shares the pain, the angst of this mother, and says that she would never ever do something like this. And it is at this moment she decides that she is not going to perform these duties anymore, and it is too painful a process for her. And however, within the context of the belief system, if she does not perform her duties, then who is going to do that? And then the gods are going to be very unhappy with the people. So this also creates a sense of fear. And so she says that as one last time, she is going to go and do the burial of this little girl, Tukni. And just when she does that, and she creates thorns around the grave so that the jackals actually cannot come and attack the grave. So And because she's given birth to a child, she herself is in that state, and she says that she's all these people come and she's talking to herself, and she's at night she's guarding the grave, and the villagers come with her husband and say that, see, she is the Bayan because she's talking to herself, and milk is oozing from her breasts. And so she responds to this by saying, I am no Bayan, I have a suckling child, and that's why my breasts ooze with milk all the time. So with this, however, the husband, who fears the community and realizes that they are probably going to do something to her, or he might have to face ostracism, he declares that this woman, his wife, is the Bayan. Now, two very important things that happen here. One, the figure of the husband, who continues to say throughout the play generally that, I have no fear, is scared, is afraid of the norms of the community that is probably going to ostracize him if he continues to stay with the woman. So, and custom has it that the Bayan cannot be killed, so the Bayan has to be kept outside the community, and she is to be given food and water. And in this context, now all this happens in a sense in a kind of flashback, because in the present moment in which the play begins is the moment where for many years this woman has been living as a Bayan, and now her son has grown up, and the son is educated, and the father has made sure that he's educated. He's also moved on and married somebody else, and so on. Now, it is this conversation after having shared the details, which is why the flashback, after having shared the details of how she becomes a Bayan with the son Bhagirath, the husband, in a sense, kind of takes a back step here, and then there is this conversation between Bhagirath and the mother. And just as the mother, who in the play has been all throughout, she's not referred to as in terms of her name Chandidasi, but as the Bayan. So she's the one, the series of robberies that are happening where the trains are stopped and so on. And it's these very people, the so-called important people, who are stopping the trains. So as they decide to carry out this other robbery, the Bayan finds out about it, and she decides to stop the train. And in the process, she is killed. Now, the play ends on a very important note where the son says that, she's my mother. She was never a Bayan. The final statement is the statement that gives her that dignity that, the husband could, of course, not give her. Now, where, of course, we see that, there are certain cliches of the system that are operating, in the sense that, I have no fear, which is something that the husband says is a fact that is repeated by the son Bhagirath. And however, it is the son who genuinely has no fear. He's also more educated. So there are these transitions there, and yet, of course, we are looking at the cliched system of marriage that allows for this ostracism of women, to be declared as the Bayan and to be thrown outside of society and to be kept at the margins, where she is, of course, considered somebody inauspicious, so no, she cannot look at anybody, and nobody is going to touch her. So there is complete alienation from the society, and it is this kind of a problematic that Mahashweta Devi presents to us. And in all of this, the focus is on the woman. And that's a very important part, I think, about all of Mahashweta Devi's plays, because where she is talking about, indigenous communities, she's talking about the tribals and so on, but it is very significant that in all of this, she looks at the figure of the woman who, according to her, is doubly marginalized. It is a figure that is, really speaking, easy to dispense with by the people who are the patriarchs of the society. So here I would also request Professor Prakash to respond to this play, because we normally do not have plays that focus on figures like, for instance, the Bayan.
You are right, Dr. Paul, in telling us that Mahashweta Devi has taken a subject that belongs to the marginalized, and this is one of the most marginalized communities that she has taken up, the Doms, who perform, the ritual of burial and who look after this, and because of this reason, they are also ostracized.
Yes.
So imagine the irony. It is an essential work, and it's supposed to be a duty, and then the person who does the work and who observes the duty part of it is ostracized. this woman will be a bayan, will be a witch. Nobody will go near her. She cannot marry. If she marries, then she has to be away all the time from society. And when she has a son, then of course the son doesn't know what to do. He has to be a part of the society, and she is not a part of the society. So all these dilemmas concern a community that is not supposed to be an integral part of society. So see the irony. And I think there is a great level of sensitivity so far as Mahashweta Devi is concerned. As a writer, she is able to empathize with this woman, and as you have rightly pointed out, it's doubly ironical that there is a person who is given this job, and that the person happens to be a woman. So she suffers at two levels. And I think Mahashweta Devi is one of the important voices of modern Indian writing, and this Bangla writing rendered into English, I think is going to raise a large number of contentious questions. So I agree. And,
right, absolutely. And in fact, also this difference in terms of the generations, though of course both parents belong to the Dome community, but when the husband says, "I have no fear," he is finally, he gives in to the demands of the community that ostracizes his wife as a bayan.
Yes. See
but the son is able to actually emerge out of it, because he's educated and times have changed, and things have moved on. So the son is able to actually, and his acknowledgement at the end of it that she's, because when she dies, somebody needs to identify the body.
So the custom is old, but times are changed. And now there is education. Now there is industrialization. Now there is a modernization. Cities are coming into being, and these communities are on the margins, and they cannot be assimilated into the main system. Earlier also they were outside the village, now they are outside society as a whole. So times changing, I think, poses a large number of disintegrating things to the scenario.
Yes. And a very remarkable aspect of Mahashweta Devi's plays is the kind of technique that she uses and the aesthetics of the play. They are very, very interesting, because it's not as if the focus is only in terms of a simplistic presentation of, let's say for instance in Bayan, the ideas about the community, or the making of the Bayan and her ostracism. But the aesthetics that she employs are very carefully thought of, and they have a complexity of their own. It's not
Can you elaborate?
Yes. For instance, the play begins, as I said, in the present moment, where this woman has been declared a bayan for many years, and the son has now grown up and wants to know, and the father finally tells him that this is actually your mother, and she became the bayan. So, and it is at that point that there is a sense of, there is a flashback. And in the flashback, the son is sent away from the stage, that the courtship is going to be recounted. So then again, following the scene of the courtship, when
aesthetics means the showing of the same thing on the stage, so that people look at themselves from a different angle.
Aesthetics also in terms of the dramaturgic technique that is being employed. So the idea of the play, not only something that is a written text, but a play that is to be performed. So I think that complexity, for instance, the time pattern, that's one. So the use of the flashback weaves in the time pattern. Then the idea that now, as the characters, there is this, what we call the Brechtian idea of alienation, how it's employed, because for instance, the figure of the husband, he says that, okay, now you must go off stage, because this is going to be the scene of the courtship between the parents. So that's how it begins.
Aesthetics means different from life, but talking about life and presenting in a certain manner.
Yes. So to show that this is a performance that is taking place, to show the that this is a craft. There is a process of the making and the putting up of a play. So
drama wakes us up.
Drama wakes us up.
The same society in which we live does not raise these questions, but drama raises these questions.
And a very sense of even balance that she maintains in her plays. It's not as if it will make, and this is my conjecture from the audience's point of view, that of course, and a lot would also depend on who performs it and the way in which the actors perform. But going by the suggestions in the play that, if we employ a Brechtian style of performance, then it's interesting to note that the play does not ever kind of, become something extremely dramatic, so that the audience is really going to be very upset about it and so on. But I think because she employs restraint, the audience is going to, let's say, for instance, in the case of the Bayan, think about both things. Think about the Dome community. Think about how easily this woman has been branded a Bayan and is, totally, she is now alienated and kept away from her immediate family, from her son, and nobody can even look at her. So she is somebody who is facing complete isolation. She's allowed to live and exist in the world, but is facing complete isolation.
Does she hit back?
This last scene where she actually stops the train is in a sense a hitting back. And I think the fact that she tries to resist when she says that she is not going to perform these duties anymore, the duties of her community.
I was looking at it from the angle of the train going away and she stopping the train. She also is a part of the scene. She is a part of the system, and she doesn't move anywhere. She'll remain here. The train is moving fast. So train is the modern India maybe. But the marginalized now know that they have been left out.
Left out.
Yes.
So and if it means to kind of change the turn of things, so that is what I think Mahashweta Devi is suggesting here.
So she is raising an issue and she is making a complaint on behalf of the community that is marginalized.
Yes.
That's a good function of drama in the modern period.
So again, in most plays she does use this idea of the myth. So the making of the community. How did this community emerge, and how did they kind of perform the duties, and how were these duties accorded to them? So these are ideas that are of course used.
Maybe you can take up one example in brief before the lecture reaches its half point, and then.
So again, when we look at another play called Ajir, Ajir also employs similar aesthetics, and the term Ajir, of course, refers to one who has sold himself to slavery for a paltry sum. So the next play is actually going to be a discussion of the Ajirs and how that happens. So here too we will see. I mean, of course, if we talk about myths, then that is employed in another play called Water. But before we move to Water, if we look at Ajir in terms of aesthetics, if we were talking about, and theatrical technique, very similar aesthetics are adopted by.
What is Ajir, by the way?
Ajir is somebody who has sold himself to slavery.
It's a name. It's a character's name.
It's no. It's the name of I mean, the slaves are known as Ajirs.
Oh, I see.
Ajir is a slave.
Somebody who has sold his effort, who has sold his labor.
Who has sold himself, who has bound himself through a contract to a particular person.
Labor.
Absolutely, to a person lifelong, and not only bound himself but also his descendants.
I see.
So everybody. So Ajir also employs similar aesthetics, and for instance, Mahashweta Devi mentions clearly that the same actor who plays for instance the role of the father, Golak, that is also the person who's going to play the role of the son, which is Patan, and the person, the female actor who plays the role of Golak's wife is going to be the one who also plays the role of the master's wife, so to say. So and in this sense, these again here, when we look at Ajir, the focus is again going to be on the fact that women, even within this, are entities that are going to be further marginalized. So the play continues. The plays continue to operate, I think, at these very, very different complex levels. One, at the level of understanding the problematic of or the social history and how this particular category, let's say, of the Ajir came into being, and then how is it that this category relates to women and what happens there. And Ajir is going to be extremely interesting in this context. So we will take up Ajir in the next part of this lecture.
So friends, we have got the idea of theatre activism from the point of view of writing, from the point of view of performance on the stage, and this is how community, society and the country is faced with questions of the cultural kind, and we have to reform ourselves, we have to restructure our society in the light of the criticism that theatre makes of the society. So we'll be further extending this discussion in the second part of the lecture. Till then, please wait. Welcome back, friends, to the second part of the lecture. In the first part, we discussed the idea of activist theatre, in which some of the problems that are hidden behind the surface of reality are revealed by theatre people in terms of the script, in terms of presentation, and in terms of performance. We have discussed so far, Dr. Payal Nagpal as the expert, the two plays of Mahashweta Devi, one that was Bayan and the other that is Ajir. And Ajir, we just began with the the idea of the bonded labor, people who sell themselves to another person, accept money, and then the whole family becomes a kind of slave of the buyer. We were in the middle of this discussion, and let's go on with this discussion and think of other plays plus the general point that is raised through this kind of theatre. So, Dr. Payal Nagpal, once again, I request you.
When we look at these plays, like in the previous lecture, we discussed Bayan and started with mention about who the Ajirs are. So it's important to realize that these are people whom we have forgotten, and there is no understanding of the existence and the context to which whether it's the tribes or whether it's other communities or whether it's the Ajirs, what is the context, and how have things really speaking changed, and have they really changed as much? So if we look at it in the context of not just theatre and activism, but also place it in the context of post-independence Indian theatre, then I think the whole movement of theatre in India becomes extremely dynamic with the intervention of Mahashweta Devi and her plays. So the Ajirs, as mentioned earlier, are people who have sold. The Ajir is somebody who has sold himself to slavery for a paltry sum, and in this Golak and his wife, they sell themselves for, and their descendants, for a sum of 3 rupees. So look at the making of the Ajir. So and I just quote from the play: "It began with the drought, with the crops drying up in the fields and hundreds dying of hunger, and all the rice and all the grain piling up in Ravan Shundri's granary, till my forefather Golakura, to save his life, sold himself and his Garib Dasi away for only 3 rupees. He sold all his descendants away too at once." So for 3 rupees, the entire, in a sense, the generations to come have actually been sold off to the person who has bought them. And in this, the context remains that of the drought, the context remains that of the famine, the fact that people do not have enough to survive. It's not enough to take care of themselves, but enough to even survive. So for 3 rupees, Golak sells himself, his wife, and the descendants that follow. So Patan says, "Watch, gentlemen, how a man becomes a slave from birth. Please allow me to become my forefather Golakura." So two things here. One, of course, how the character here and actor character is commenting on the character, is commenting on the role when he says, "Watch, gentlemen, how a man becomes a slave from birth." And then he says, "Please allow me to become my forefather Golakura." So this is what, this is that break, this is that use of alienation that kind of, allows us to understand that these are just actors who are playing certain characters. And so the same actor who plays Patan, who's the son who's born into slavery, is also the person who plays the role of the forefather, that is Golakura. So you must try and visualize and imagine what the impact of all this is on the audience. Does the audience kind of, look at it as some kind of dramatic element that is being brought out in this, or is the audience able to actually distance itself from the story that is being presented, and is able to ask questions about why is it that what was the need for, let's say, Golakura to sell himself? So it's not just a making of the Ajir. The idea is that what was the need for them to become Ajirs? Why is it that they decided to sell themselves? And so, of course, and how their descendants have to then brave with and put up with the kind of slavery that is there. So, and here too, it's not as if there are these continuous plot lines, but yes, there are these ideas that as playwright Mahashweta Devi is kind of, she's throwing in. So, and as this is something that I've already mentioned in the context of Bayan, that the aesthetics is something that she never loses sight of, and she's always able to kind of weave the ideas into a kind of plot line, yet at the same time allow a kind of objectivity to emerge, so that the focus in the play does not get lost and is not diluted at any cost. So again, this is a quote from the play. "You're a clever fox. You tell Patan you have his bond of slavery and he doesn't dare run away. You tell me you've given me jewelry, you've given my father a share of the cropland, then you go to Purnashashi's house." Now, this is a statement that is actually made by the master's wife. So, where we have Golak and Golakura and his wife Garibdasi, who've sold themselves into slavery, Patan is born into it. So, the play begins with the master beating up Patan, and it is the master's wife who realizes that here is this man who is, in a sense, fooling Patan, because in a sense there is no bond of slavery that can be recovered, because as long as that document exists, the bond that has been kind of signed by, stamped by Golakura, as long as that piece of paper exists, the slavery exists. So it's very important for the Ajir, in this case Patan, to get that piece of paper. So the master's wife here, in this sense, as is presented in the play, she responds by saying that, you're a clever fox. You tell Patan you have his bond of slavery, and he doesn't dare to run away. So that's how she says that you have trapped him. You have given him this illusion that that piece of paper still exists. And
there is a discussion that is taking place in front of the audience. So somebody is raising a question, and then the people on the stage start discussing among themselves the social problem.
Yes, and here actually what is very interesting is that the woman is not the Ajir here. She is the master's wife, and she says that like you have fooled Patan, you are fooling me also.
So the woman also becomes Ajir.
The woman becomes, in a sense, worse than the Ajir, because she says, you tell me you've given me jewelry, you've given my father a share of the cropland, and then she goes on to say that you have promised to give me a son and so on, and then you go to Purnashashi's house, who's the local courtesan. So, what is important here is that, and this is something that she shares later, how she has been married off to this man who is much older than her in age and is obviously not able to meet the requirements of marriage, and so she says that you have kept me also trapped and you have kept Patan also trapped.
Which means there are layers of reality, one layer, then another layer, then a third layer on the way, and then all these layers start distinguishing themselves as well as coming together.
And also the fact that all these layers are, in a sense, being controlled. They are being controlled by the master in this case, who is keeping, let's say, the Ajirs in control. He's keeping supposedly his wife in control, and she cannot move out, she cannot interact with anybody, and all these people form the exploited lot, in the sense, in the play. So who is...
And the master who is using the law, that law has been made somewhere else.
That law.
So he is not addressing actually the needs of this house, but the needs of law there.
Yes.
So that there also is quite relevant.
Yeah.
I see.
So and the kind of physical violence that Patan has to undergo is something that is hinted at, and there is this element of great attraction between the Ajir and the master's wife, and both of them are obviously around the same age. So and here Patan seeks to run away, and there's a group of gypsies that's there in the village, and the master's wife tells him about them.
Dr. Payal Nagpal, you used the word social history earlier, and here you are giving examples from this. So how do you relate the play to social history and social history to the play?
I think what, for instance, in a play like Ajir, when finally Patan decides to run away, and he wants to run away with this gypsy woman, because the master's wife is somebody whom he reveres. So she's, in a sense, you know, the figure that almost like the figure of the mother that cannot be flouted. So he tries to run away with the gypsy woman, and the mob catches in on them. And so he is beaten up and he's sent back, and that's where the master's wife kind of approaches him, and they decide, she takes him with her and says that, you know, I will give you that bond that declares that you are an Ajir and you can be with me then.
One straight question. Is it a play of the 20th century? Is it a play of the 19th century? Is it a play of today?
It's a play of the 20th century. It's a play that focuses on the context of post-independence India.
Post-independence India.
Yes.
Free India.
Free India.
When constitutionally slavery is not there.
Yes.
But it is actually there.
It is actually there. And that is exactly what Mahashweta Devi is pointing out, and that's what she's saying, that, you know, I mean, we are talking about independence and we are talking about a different kind of world altogether, but there are people like the Bayan, for instance, who go hungry. There are people like the Ajirs who are being kept as bonded slaves for no reason.
And there is a kind of market existing in the country where people are sold individually.
Yes.
This is there. Actually, this has been reported by journalists. And there are other plays like Tendulkar's play Kamla was also based on this.
Yes.
So it's a serious problem, and this question this writer is raising.
And not only that, people are being sold where to maintain the facade of being totally independent and so on. This might not happen, but here is somebody like Patan who is born into it. And he's being fooled. So that's actually the point that I was coming to. So the mob actually becomes a character in itself, and the mob drags Patan back. And the play, when he asks the master's wife for the sheet of paper so that he can declare his own freedom, she says that there is no sheet of paper. Now he of course thinks that she's lying, and she says that look at the gamcha in which this paper was kept, it's gone to dust. So there is no paper. And he says, but that can't be true, there has to be a paper. And so in a fit of anger, he kills this woman. So and finally when the master comes and the mob enters once again, and he asks for that piece of paper, the master admits. He says that yes, there is no piece of paper. So where he of course regrets having, in this fit of rage, having attacked the master's wife. At the same time, I think Mahashweta Devi is making a very serious point here, again focusing on the women. And so of course the social history of the Ajirs and so on, but within that, again, what is the position of this woman who supposedly is not an Ajir?
So the woman in any case is integrated with the social history.
Is integrated with,
even of the master class.
And I think somewhere Mahashweta Devi is also saying that social histories change when you look at it from the perspective of women. Now here the woman is not the Ajir. She is the master's wife, so to say, and I've deliberately used the word master within quotes. And she's supposed to be in control. And yet she is somebody who is killed by the Ajir. So I think there is a very serious point that social histories need to be understood also from the point of view of women, and that's when the whole perspective is going to shift.
This is a new idea that history, the same history that we study, will be reinterpreted, will be different when it is looked at from the point of view of women.
And also when we get back to the point about the Ajirs, I think looking at a particular space, for instance, the space that Mahashweta Devi is talking about. So when we look at the making of the Ajir, there is one history that we get. But the history that the master is going to speak about is going to be very different from the history that the Ajir will speak about. And the history that this Ajir has inherited. I think this idea of the past, something that Shramik Bandyopadhyay has also pointed out, is very, very significant here in Mahashweta Devi's plays. Because when we look at the Bayan, there is this idea of the myth, how they get along to get on to perform the work that they do, and then here too this idea of inheritance, and how this idea of inheritance is being resisted in modern India. I think that is a very important point, because the Bayan also does not want to perform the duties that she is doing. Maybe she wants to do something different with herself.
Does Mahashweta Devi give some idea of the resolution of the problem?
When we talk about the resolution, I think the resolution is in questioning the structures, is in questioning and coming out and, for instance, what we are just talking about. So a relook at social histories.
From a different angle.
From a different angle, and the angle is an angle that needs to be situated at the margins. I think by putting forth their histories in the forefront, by writing plays on these communities, I think she's asking us to understand that social history is not about only one unilinear sort of point of view. It is something that needs to be looked at from these shifts and different perspectives.
And when you look at them from different perspectives and the analysis is made, then that analysis will indicate the kind of solution that is possible in the circumstances.
Yes, and I think if somewhere, I think if people were to look at and understand and interpret social history from the margins, then I think the solutions and resolutions would emerge automatically. So, and so he says that, in fact, there's a point in the play where the Ajir says that, he will not, it begins with his desire to get married actually because he's young, and he finally says that he will probably not marry because he does not want to produce more Ajirs. Because going by the lineage, Golak has not only sold himself off, but all his descendants. So even after Patan, if Patan has children, then they too are going to be born into slavery. That's the suggestion that the play is making. So which is why he says that he should probably not do this.
You see, you're talking about aesthetics. In aesthetics, is there a voice that represents the voice of the writer?
I think the voice of the writer is the voice that remains in these characters. It's
but there's no single character as a spokesperson of the writer, or is there?
Not a spokesperson, but I think the general idea would be that characters who are there on the margins,
they themselves become finally spokespersons of the author.
Yes.
I see.
And there is a shift there. For instance, I think this is a very, very sensitive understanding. So on the one hand, I think Mahashweta Devi's alliance would be with, let's say, the Ajir, and at the same time also with the woman who is not the Ajir. So when she says that, she tells her husband that you are a clever fox, and the play ends on this note that, basically Patan has been fooled. There is no document. So the play, in a sense, is hinged on this idea that as long as the document is there, the slavery continues.
Which means that in different characters, some kind of a flash of recognition, as it is called, occurs, and that flash actually represents the viewpoint of the author.
Not just a flash. In the case of this woman, it is a very sustained recognition, and that's why she desires a relationship with Patan. She wants to resist the structure of marriage, in which, I mean, she too, in a sense, has been sold off. That's the underlying realization, where she says that, she's pretty much being treated the way Patan is being treated, the way the master is fooling Patan, so he's also fooling her. So she's both are, in a sense, trapped, and these traps are of different kinds.
It's a very complex answer.
So
yes.
I think that is the point that Mahashweta Devi is making. So with this, we move on to another very interesting play. It's called Water, and this is another play about the domes, and it focuses on villages where there is, even in post-independence India, there is a huge crisis of water. And I'm sure even today there are places where, it's not as if one opens the tap and the water comes out. So one has to travel a bit to get water. But here this is different. The idea is that there is a huge crisis of water. These are places that are afflicted with famines and droughts and so on. So, but Mahashweta Devi also points out problems that are systemic. And she says that, she points out how in these far-flung villages, even when benefits are sent, even when policies are made and benefits are sent, there are people who do not allow them to reach the people, the villagers or the common men. So this kind of systemic problem is something where the people are unable to kind of make their voice heard and are unable to deal with this issue, is something that she deals with in great detail in the play called Water. And it's interesting that there is this irony in the play that is brought out through the character of Magai. Now, Magai is somebody who knows where water is. So, like there is a little myth, a little story to tell about each community, again here there is a story to tell about this community, how he and his community is blessed to know where water is there. For instance, he says there is a hidden story here too. This is a dome belief about Ganga. When the Ganga said, I am the goddess, the nether Ganga. Whenever men dig for a well or a pond, you will gather the offerings, pray for water and go around looking for where water lies, hidden till I tell you where to dig. So these are people who know where the water is, and it's very interesting because in the play there is also this teacher called Jitin, and he says that, and somebody, one of the officers says that, but there is, sorry, nothing scientific in this. This ability to look for water. There's nothing scientific in this, and Jitin says that maybe there is something scientific about these beliefs and practices. It's just something that we are not aware of. So he does not relegate it to some kind of a make-believe thing, but he says that, these people understand their land and their context in a way that nobody else does. And because they've lived there and they've they're bound to this land, they understand it and they know. For instance, Magai knows, and he has successfully been able to point out wherever water is there. So, and however, the irony is that Magai, who is able to point out where the water is and build, and the people who are in power there, who regulate the panchayat and so on, they are the ones who build the well there, but these people are not allowed to use the water from that very well. So series of wells that have been dug up and series of wells that have been denied to these people. So it is only with the entry of Jitin, who is the teacher, that there is this shift that one can notice, where he decides to teach the children from all communities, and he says that the children now need to be empowered, and this is something that is resented very strongly by the people who are in power in the village. And when it comes to water, Jitin of course goes elsewhere, and he comes back to the village and says that what you can do is, the river flows in such a way that you can contain the water there and you can build a dam. And the dam is built. When Magai and the others say, Dhura, his son, they say that, who is going to build this dam? So they say that the people are going to build the dam, and the people build a dam. However, the play ends on the note where the people who are in power want to destroy this dam. So the role of the teacher here is very, very significant. And at the same time, again here, if we look at it in terms of aesthetics and the kind of dramaturgy that is employed, so there is a chorus, there is a group of women that say water, 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 or the chorus that cries, give us water, give us water. And we look at it in this sense. For instance, when we have Phulmani, who is Magai's wife, she says, we've looked on enough, we die without water, our little ones go thirsty. Our women dig at the sands of the river for a cupful of water. Who would play such a cruel game with water that we need to quench our thirst? So on the one hand is Phulmani's husband, Magai, who knows where the water lies. And on the other hand is Phulmani, who digs holes into the sands of the river to get a cupful of water, which, by the way, they have to take at night itself, because in the morning that water is going to dry up. So this sheer scarcity of water, the complete systemic failure in a sense to ensure that things reach these people, how they make the dam, and yet at the same time the people who are in power in that particular village, they kind of move towards destroying the dam. It's very interesting to note that there is another play, for instance in Bangla this is Jal, and in Tamil there is another play which is called Thanir Thanir, and it's translated as water. So, and it was written by Komal Swaminathan, and the play is about the village Attipatti, where there is a traveler who's actually committed supposedly he's killed somebody, and the police are on the lookout for him, Vellai He gets water from a nearby village for the people of Attipatti who do not have water. And like Mahashweta Devi's play, this play that Thanir Thanir, which has come later, is a play that also ends on the same note, where Vellai teaches the people to kind of make a canal so that they can generate their own resources, and again the people who are in power in that village decide to destroy this canal. So how there is a struggle that is on, where people are trying to sustain themselves and their resources. And with this, I would like to just read out one or two things that Mahashweta Devi herself said. And she says that, once I became, this is a quotation from Shamik Bandyopadhyay's book, Once I became a professional writer, Mahashweta Devi said, I felt increasingly that a writer should document his own time in history. The socio-economic history of human development, she says, has always fascinated me. And she says that we are in a world where the rich have become richer, a brutally complacent and ignorant richer class has come into being. So she says that it is the job of the writer to document all this. What is the function of the writer? She raises this question and asks that, what should the writer do? And she gives the answer. She says the job of the writer is to document his own time in history. And she says that the past has to figure. And for instance, in all these plays that we've discussed today, the past figures in terms of these stories and myths, beliefs and so on. She says, but the writer has to document his or her own time and history. And she says that the experience of the land, the people is very, very important. And she says, as a responsible writer, standing at a turning point in history has to take a stand in defense of the exploited. Otherwise, history will never forget him. I think this
there is a question that I would like to ask. The question is regarding the existence of a character in this play called Water, and that character is teacher. You said that there is a teacher character.
There is a teacher called Jitin.
Yes.
And Jitin teaches the people how to actually generate their own resources by building a dam.
I see. So you can call him the...
play is called Water.
Water, and this teacher plays a role there.
Yes.
And so far as the knowledge of people at the larger level is concerned, the teacher is the writer himself or herself.
Yes.
So that kind of metaphor is expanded further in the quotation that you have given at the end.
Yes.
So this is the role of the teacher.
This is the role of the teacher. And I think, if we are looking for a specific voice that coheres with Mahashweta Devi's, I think what she says about her own role clarifies it when she says that, as a writer who's standing at a turning point, the writer has to take a stand in defense of the exploited. And I think that is what she's doing. So she would not just be with the teacher, she would be with all those people who are not getting water to drink, who know where the water lies, but this water is denied them.
That knowledge of the existence of water, the knowledge of the place of the water, that the people know.
Yes.
But they don't have the power to execute it according to their information.
They are denied. So there is discrimination, and so they are not allowed to use the wells.
And they have to be made aware by somebody, and that somebody may be the writer.
Jitin, that somebody is the writer, that somebody in this case is the teacher. So in all of these plays, I think if there is one resolution that one would look at, I think education. She is looking towards education, because if you look at Bayan's son, Bhagirath, he is the educated one who actually has no fear, because he declares that she is his mother.
Would you then say that theatre is the place where people get their education?
Yes, very strongly, because when we have a writer like Mahashweta Devi who says that there is a stand that needs to be taken, otherwise history will never forget such a person, I think it is important to state this. Yes, it is totally there.
And the teacher has to go into the chronicling, as you say, and has to go to the history of the recent period and the earlier period, and to connect with the present.
Yes. And of course, I think education is, it's not about books, it's not about, joining institutions. Education is about understanding the world to which we belong. And I think Mahashweta Devi's plays, and specifically picked out plays that people would have not maybe read or heard about. So where this process of education is knowing that there are these communities that exist, there are people who are still facing these problems, and we are talking about post-independence India. So yes.
Friends, we come to the end of the discussion, and in this particular discussion we confronted questions of awareness, questions of inequality, questions of injustice, particularly that is done to women, and taking this idea to the audience so that they also think about them and see the answers. And Dr. Payal Nagpal, you have given some points for us to ponder over. Thank you very much, and our viewers. We come to the end of this penultimate discussion, and the next discussion will be about all the entire program, and all three of us are going to participate in it. Thank you.